When you tamper with your reality, bad things can happen to you. I love VR. It can provide us with new perspectives on different things and create immersion like we've never seen before. Simply put, VR is astonishing and otherworldly. Although, the VR technology can bite back and potentiate suffering of a disorder that impacts the way we see ourselves and reality itself. For example, a person decided to gamble and stretch the human experience to escape the regular world and live in the virtual one instead. He played VR chat for 16 hours a day for months. His real reality slowly became the virtual one. His dreams would be located in the virtual world, and each morning he woke up, he didn't know if he was in VR or not. By the time he figured out what world he was in though, he would go straight back into the virtual world. His experience of life was hazy and strange, but he felt at home in the virtual world. This person experienced what is known as DSM, or Depersonalization/Derealization disorder, and it's becoming more prominent with people that play copious amounts of virtual reality. This disorder creates a divide between yourself and reality. You feel like you aren't actually here. It's a feeling of fakeness, and you feel like you lose your sense of identity.
Imagine if this is your reality, that you're actually not behind the screen, but yet you still feel as if you're behind the screen watching this video. So everything is kind of two-dimensional to you. Everything kind of looks like a screen to you, even your hands. Like imagine if you're looking at you're really your hand and you're looking at it through a screen. It feels unreal to you. Everything looks unreal to you and two-dimensional. You don't have a sense of three dimensions in the world. You can gauge depth perception just like you can gauge it in a video game, but it's pretty annoying to walk around in a kind of a two-dimensional world feeling detached. I mean, I've gotten used to this feeling, but it's very disturbing.
A study called Virtual Reality, A Code of Ethical Conduct, explores the ethical concerns of users with VR. The study has an interesting passage, which states, "We suspect that heavy use of VR might trigger symptoms associated with depersonalization/derealization disorder. Overall, the disorder can be characterized as having chronic feelings or sensations of unreality. In the case of depersonalization, individuals experience an unreality of the bodily self, and in case of derealization, individuals experience the external world as unreal. For instance, those suffering from the disorder tend to report feeling as if they are automata and feeling as if they are living in a dream." These feelings of unreality do not involve delusions of unrealness in the world itself, but instead it radically changes your relationship between yourself and the world. In different forms of philosophy, depersonalization and derealization can be seen as enlightened states, where the person loses connection with the ego to feel free. However, this kind of depersonalization isn't the same thing. In fact, it's quite closer to the opposite. Instead of feeling free, you feel trapped, anxious, and alienated. Because of this, it has been dubbed the dark side of enlightenment. It does not matter if the person affected fully knows the difference between the virtual and real world. The VR technology manipulates the psychological mechanisms in generating our experiences of realness in almost an identical way compared to the people that suffer from this disorder. The researchers from the study are concerned with long-term immersion of VR. If a person decides to live their life in VR instead of the real world, it might be difficult to adjust back to reality. Heavy users of VR may begin to experience the real world and their real bodies as unreal, effectively shifting their sense of reality exclusively to the virtual environment. This connects back to the story at the beginning, with the person that would play VR chat for 16 hours a day. He effectively shifted his brain's interpretation of consciousness to his virtual avatar, which readjusted his reality to the virtual world. This really makes me wonder, how do I define myself? Enlightenment, in many philosophy and religions, refers to the realization that there is no self. Although our sense of self is usually defined as a little invisible thing in our heads, making decisions and ordering the body to perform actions. but our consciousness is seen as separated from the external world, rendering things around us, which we are connected to and dependent on. In a way, though, we are slightly alienated from the aspect of being alive, with our own perspectives and worlds happening in our lives. Everyone feels different. Depersonalization is disconnected from the feeling of what I just described. So being slightly alienated for being alive, then being alienated again for being depersonalized, the feelings of this can be intense and scary. Little knowledge of this phenomenon is known to the world. Luckily, it's not something to fear. It doesn't happen to just anyone, and playing a couple hours of VR a day probably won't trigger this. It's something that could happen if you spend a majority of your time in a virtual environment. I believe this topic should be studied further. It will help us understand some of the implications that stuff like full dive VR will have on the human brain. Especially with more immersive VR technology coming out, people will be more inclined to spend longer periods of time in the virtual world. Hopefully, the upcoming virtual pioneers won't be plagued by the confusing experience of depersonalization, although only time will tell with that.